This was an extraordinary event yesterday on the show where we were talking about, you know, Keir Starmer wanting to improve the lot of people waiting for doctor's appointments and also for hospital appointments as well. So we got a doctor on to tell us, you know, what the problem was with GPs and how they can't see as many people as they'd like. And he said, well, you know, of course, the thing is, it's very, very busy. We haven't got enough, we see 1 million people a day. We haven't got enough time in the day to see everybody. He then revealed that he only works a 3-day week as a GP and he does 2 days doing something else. And you kind of go, well, maybe that's the problem.
I mean, I
didn't see it that way.
Yeah, I mean, this is the issue. I mean, there is so much of this sort of stuff going unreported and everyone's sympathies all automatically go to the GPs because, you know, these are people who look after you. But then when you realise the types of contracts they're on and how, you know, they're trying to basically do his best, you know, make as much money as they can. But you also have this other issue of floating GPs who basically are there on demand you know, as substitutes, you know, to come in. And some of them are leaving the business because they're not being placed in surgeries. And there are sort of thousands of these GPs looking for work and they can't find work. I mean, there are so many areas here where you just think, what's going on? Why are we in this health crisis? It's the same thing, of course, with this, you know, the doctor's strike.
Doctor's strike beginning today, 5 days of it.
And, you know, this is absolutely indefensible, I think, because how on earth can you expect the government to have a negotiation when we don't have a government? You know, the Labour Party is going to be the people to deal with this. So why are you striking now and putting, you know, increasing these NHS waiting lists? It's a totally political move, isn't it? Completely political. It's costing £1.7 billion, which could have been spent on reducing those waiting lists, getting more machines to help speed up processes for cancer diagnosis and so forth. I think it's outrageous.
Well, this is the problem because also apparently I'm told by people in the NHS when there is a strike it sort of triples and quadruples the number of delays to everything else because everything literally grinds to a halt and it takes another 5 days to get it back up and running again to get everybody sort of back to where they should have been 10 days ago. You know what I mean?
And that's a huge contributory factor to the NHS waiting list that we have now. Yes, there's a big COVID backlog, but, you know, things were coming down until the strike started.
Absolutely right. Let's have a look at the clip from yesterday. This is Dr. Dean Eggett, who's in Doncaster. Surely you'd be better off being a doctor for Tuesday and Thursday, and then you'd cut down on all, you know, the waiting list, wouldn't you?
And that comes back to the original point. If I was to be a doctor 5 days a week, mentally, it's just not possible.
No?
You would burn out and you wouldn't be able to do the job.
Well, most people manage to do their job 5 days a week, though, don't they? You don't. I mean, you don't sign up to do a job and say, I'm only going to do it for 3 days a week because that's all I can handle, but I'm going to make some money doing something else for two of the other days. Doesn't sound right.
Well, actually, as doctors, that isn't how it works because it's incredibly mentally straining.
Well, maybe that's why there's a problem then, because you're not doing 5 days a week. That surely it's obvious, isn't it?
No, it's not possible to do 5 days a week simply because the mental strain would stop doctors from working efficiently and effectively and start helping them make dangerous decisions.
Lots of people pointed out, of course, after that particular interview aired, that doctors used to work 5 days a week. Up until relatively recently, some people were getting in touch saying, well, my doctor works 5 days a week. I know that because I work in his office. And he works as a GP 5 days a week. And I'm willing to accept that sometimes there's admin to be done or sometimes there's other things that might take them away from doing the job. But if you want to be a GP, surely you should want to be a GP every day.
My uncle, who's 96 now, he qualified as a doctor in the 1950s. 5 days a week, plus evening house calls.
Yes.
Right? Do any doctors do house calls today?
And they didn't seem to be suffering from strain particularly, did they?
Absolutely not. Again, this is just more the fragility of the modern mind more than anything else.
Yes, I think so. Let's talk about parking fines, because according to a piece in Telegraph, parking fines could double to £100 under new rules being introduced by the private car parking industry. Now, this is not so much, I suppose, council-controlled parking on the street. This will be kind of in car parks, in sort of, you know, sometimes supermarket car parks where, you know, you don't know you're supposed to pay, or you're supposed to register to pay, otherwise you get a £90 fine.
Yeah, I mean, even in my apartment building, they are finding cars even from the residents.
Really?
If they can't see, and you can't appeal these processes once you have a fine. I mean, it's a terrible thing.
You get stuck in this kind of rabbit hole, don't you?
And it's just yet more of milking the British car driver. You know, it's this war on the cars is ceaseless, and it's coming from every single direction. It's coming from private companies. It's coming from government, it's coming from councils. Just driving a car is no longer a pleasant experience. Well, it hasn't been for a long time.
I was speaking to somebody the other day who, in London now, has just given up driving altogether because he's getting so many fines for driving at 22 miles an hour in a 20 zone. He said it was just impossible. You know,
well, I drove every day of my life since I was 16, living in Canada. It was like an appendage of my body. I've been back in London for 22 years, and I haven't driven once. You know, because in central London you don't really need to.
You don't really need to, as long as you're not carrying things with you, or you're not taking kids to school or whatever, you know. I mean, but the point is that people who do drive are getting fined and sort of penalised every step of the way.
Well, even this new 20 mile an hour, I mean, Wales is re-evaluating the whole thing. I don't know why we're not re-evaluating it, because, you know, even coming into this morning,
it's making money.
There's no traffic at this time of day, and we're travelling at a snail's pace to get where you're going. You know, some old lady passes you on her bicycle.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is the thing. They say don't overtake bikes. Well, you can't, because they're going quicker than you are. You know, it's absolutely ridiculous. Now, my favourite story of the day, this is from the RSPCA, which I can only describe as the woke RSPCA now. They basically warned you, if you've got a rabbit, don't feed them lettuce and don't feed them carrots. I mean, I'm sorry, this is something that's been going on for generations, I would say.
What's up, Doc? Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is, and not only that, they are suggesting instead of carrots and lettuce, because of their high sugar content, you turn to kale. It's like, what sort of fad diet is this? You know, we're used to having people forcing kale into all of our meals.
I didn't even know what kale was until about 2 years ago.
Now they're giving it to these poor rabbits. You know, leave them alone. I used to have rabbits.
Leave them alone, exactly.
Leave the rabbits alone. I used to have rabbits when I was a child.
Right. You give them carrots,
and lettuce as well. And they didn't seem any the worse for wear for it. I mean, come on, for heaven's sake.
I mean, this is the thing. The RSPCA now seems to be like many organisations. It's a sort of it's a woke kind of lobbying group, as opposed to actually helping people. People say to me all the time, if you find a wounded animal on the street and you ring the RSPCA, they don't want to know. They're not really interested in rescuing it. It's not what they do anymore. They're too busy giving out instructions on, you know, trying not to fatten up your rabbit.
But I'm sure they've got, you know, animal psychiatrists there to talk them through.
Oh, no doubt.
Some healing therapy.
Absolutely right. Now, the Royal Mail is up for sale, as we know, and has been sold off to a Danish investor, I think a billionaire of one kind or another. But the story today from all sorts of papers saying all the advisors and the lawyers and the people involved in the deal are going to cream off about 146 million quid from the sale, which seems very over the top to me.
Yeah, I mean, every time you hear about the Royal Mail these days, it's one horror story after another. It does seem to be a rather sort of peculiar and corrupt organisation.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, but I'm traditionalist, and I think the Royal Mail should remain a British state-owned institution. You know, it was founded by Henry VIII. You know, great history under the Stuarts and so forth. I think it's the oldest mail service in the world, proudly bearing the crown. And I just don't think it's right to have it in private hands at all.
I mean, it's everything that has gone sort of commercialised about it. You know, they sort of split away the post office counters system. They made the mini post offices a different business. I mean, everything they've done has just been a complete disaster, isn't it?
Yeah, well, whether it's the water companies, I would say the rail companies, Royal Mail here, everything is a disaster. And I just think, you know, we should be able to depend on the state providing a basic mail service.
Yes.
You know, we remember the two times a day you used to get your mail in the old days.
I remember that.
At least, you know, once a day you should have a flat fee stamped letter being able to be delivered. I think that's one of the essentials of a civilised society.
Yeah, absolutely right. Meanwhile, in terms of other systems that don't work terribly well, it was only earlier in the week, it was at the weekend, I think, we had Manchester Airport pretty much shut down by a power cut. Similar situation at Euston Station yesterday, some kind of chaotic scenario suddenly happened. And people couldn't go anywhere, the trains weren't running, they couldn't see what was going on the boards. It was absolutely steaming hot. And I don't know what it is about the services that we have in this country, but they're all kind of on the point of collapse at any given time.
Yeah, I mean, we're on a knife edge, especially, you know, at least these things are happening just before the school break and the summer peak. But, you know, if this happens again during the school holidays, I mean, it's going to be absolute bedlam.
Right.
And this happens every year. These are not one-off scenarios.
Right.
And they seem completely ill-prepared for them. They don't seem to have a backup plan or any sort of training for these sort of emergency situations. But it also goes to show you how fragile our infrastructure is.
Yes.
You know, we've just had this story about the NHS hacking linked to the Kremlin, right?
Right.
China, particularly, and Russia are trying to target the infrastructure of Western countries.
Yeah.
And I'm increasingly fearful that we aren't particularly up to scratch and being able to battle some of these things off, especially with the advance of AI.
No, exactly right. It's a terrible situation, and as you say, only going to get worse as the summer goes on. The heat, though, thankfully, has kind of calmed down a bit, so it'll be a bit cooler today. You won't have to go and fan yourself in some kind of shady glade. But Rafe, thank you very much indeed.